Hello, everyone. Welcome to class, students. Let me see. I realize that the music or the fire sounds are not coming in. They should be. They're right here. No, that's not it. I'll get it there eventually. Hopefully everyone is doing well today. How are you all? Doing well, I hope. Let me see. Let me go through. Scuffed, welcome to class. Crusader, thank you for being first. DT, thank you. Ike, thank you for coming in. Eric, Rokas, thank you for coming in. Look at all those crazy things. Harvest, thank you for coming in. The music feels like I'm watching a video on why I should attend this particular university. We've got a dance party going on. Please don't get hurt in the mosh pit. But class has begun, so have a seat now. And we'll get started with the lesson. Let me see. Why is it not telling me that it's open when it is literally right here? Let me open a new application. Audio capture 2. Okay. There you are. Now I delete you. Okay. So, hello everyone. Yes. Welcome in. Fireplace is going. Background music is off. Would you rather sit-ups or nya? I would rather nya for 5 minutes. Nya. However, nya. Fireplace is a little loud. Whoops. Thank you for telling me. Crank that down a little bit. However, nya. That reminds me, nya. I'm going to go into settings and remove that for the moment. So that's nya. I can read nya. Okay, that's gone. Okay. I'll order the usual. Okay, we've got, oh my god. Nya. It's not my class without technical difficulties. This is a fact. Now it's too low. Okay, there we go. There you go, DT. Rokas, I just said no nyas. I turned it off. I will refund your nya. Actually, you should be able to refund yourself. Because you're a mod. Okay, so today, for today's class, today's lesson, soon. You're welcome, DT. For today's lesson, we are going to be reading The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. But as with all of my classes, when we have a new book, we do have a presentation to go through. And I realize now at this point, I never put in a map of the Land of Oz. So I'm doing that really quick, just so you can see what I'm seeing in it. There we go. I can make PowerPoints really fast. Okay. There we go. Alright, so let's go to kind of a welcome in. Thank you for the lurk. I appreciate it. Let's go to our lesson plan. So we have The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Bloop. Let me move myself over a little bit. It should be over here. I'm locked in place, that's why. Okay, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. D&D in the Land of Oz. That would be interesting. There are quite a few D&D players here who I'm sure would have an interesting thought on that perspective. I'm not sure if Matsu is here, if he can come tonight, but I'm sure he would have an interesting take on that as well. So, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. There is a civilization map of Oz. That'll come at the end, I think. So, a little bit here. Let me get myself more out of the way. Holy moly. Go out all completely. So his full name was Lyman Frank Baum, and if you see an initial in front of a name and then the middle name, it's because they prefer to go by their middle name. He was born in Chinango, New York, and died in LA. He was a very prolific writer. The first Oz book came out in 1900. However, there are 14 novels in the Oz series alone. He has 41 other novels, four additional ones have been lost. So really, he wrote 45 other novels, 83 short stories, and 200 poems. He is also credited as having written 42 scripts for plays and such. One of which was produced in 1902, and his most famous work, obviously, is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. He was born on May 15th, 1856, and died on May 6th, 1919. So, what's really, really super interesting about the author is how he predicted or really envisioned the future. So his books were much more realistic in what they anticipated in the future than shows like the Jetsons. Like the Jetsons had flying cars and all these crazy things. In his books, though, Baum mentions ideas that later become the television, augmented reality, laptops, wireless phones, although not necessarily cell phones, but like the wireless house phones, women in more male-dominated workspaces, including in leadership roles. Also, really, really rare for that time period, is Baum's included transgender, non-binary, and genderqueer characters, and not in a negative light. Tip is one of the characters. Zordon was inspired. Yes, he was. Zordon in Power Rangers was inspired by Oz. So Tip, we will, if we continue reading the stories, we will read about him. And he's really interesting. I'm not going to ruin who he is, but he's a very important character in later books. I'm trying to see if that one's in this version. Yes, he is in the third Oz book. He was also staunchly feminist, but also stereotypical at times. And some of the stereotyping actually came from what his publisher required of him. So his publisher rejected some of his manuscripts that had female protagonists because the women were too independent. So he had to dial it down a notch in order to get it published, which reads as kind of inauthentic and like stereotyping. But in initial manuscripts, they weren't necessarily like that. Also, however, unfortunately, he was, "Hi, random, how are you?" As with many authors of the time, he was horribly racist, particularly against indigenous groups, and relied on racist characters. One of the articles that he had published was like, "Hello, Clarissa, welcome in." It was basically him saying, yeah, we did horrible things to the native peoples when we came here, so let's do one more horrible thing and exterminate them all, because if we don't, we're all going to be killed. So really terrible in those regards. So again, not a perfect man. Great in some aspects, terrible in others. So like many novels throughout history, Baum's novel is considered to be a political allegory of the late 19th century. So he states that his books were written to please children, and even in the introduction for his original one, it says, having this thought in mind, the story of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was written solely to please children of today. It aspires to being a modernized fairy tale in which the wonderment and joy are retained and the heartaches and nightmares are left out. However, there's, again, I've talked about this so many times with other books, there is the death of the author, and then there's also looking at what was happening around the time and making the comparisons, and there's too much going on with his political views and in the text and historically that it's not solely coincidence. So there are comparisons between politicians and characters, as well as commentary about silver and gold. So, for example, we have Dorothy and her friends who walk on the yellow brick road, which is gold. And in the original book, her shoes are silver and not ruby. At the time, there was a debate about the gold standard and whether the U.S. should have a gold and silver or gold-only currency standard. Furthermore, Dorothy is a representative of the innocent middle class. The Tin Man is industry and Scarecrow is agriculture. And color is also very important, used as metaphors of like the Emerald City and such. Okay? So the gold standard, here we go, history lesson. And I took this from gold.org because I couldn't condense it in my own words. So the gold standard was a system under which nearly all countries fixed the value of their currency in terms of a specified amount of gold, or linked their currency to that of a country which did so. So domestic currencies were freely convertible into gold at the fixed price, and there was no restriction on the import or export of gold. So you could basically buy the gold. Gold coin, or change it. Gold coins circulated as domestic currency alongside coins of other metals and notes, with composition varying by country. Also, each currency was fixed in terms of gold. Exchange rates between participating currencies are also fixed. Apparently, I didn't get rid of Nightbot, so Lorelai gets free shoutouts all night. Also, in how it worked, the website states, under the gold standard, a country's money supply was linked to gold. The necessity of being able to convert fiat or decree money into gold on demand strictly limited the amount, she's a ghost, she's here, amount of fiat decree money in circulation to a multiple of the central bank's gold reserves. So we have, the gold reserves. Most countries had illegal minimum ratios of gold to notes currency issued or other similar limits. International balance of payments differences were settled in gold, and countries with a balance of payments surplus would receive gold inflows, while countries in deficit would experience the outflow of gold. So there's kind of back and forth between them. This was problematic in the United States for a few reasons. So Henry Littlefield was a history teacher, and he analyzed The Wizard of Oz in 1964, and he wrote about the political allegory he found present. So later on, other, researchers and such kind of contested it because they're like, well, he missed this, he missed that. However, he discusses the origins of Oz as shortening of ounces for silver. Quentin Taylor made further connections, saying that Dorothy is the everyman, which is a common theme in literature, meaning the innocent led astray trying to get back home, the person who represents all of humanity or all of a certain group of people. The scheming politician in the wizard is the wizard who tricks people into believing he is good but resorts to tricks in order to lead, and has others, such as Dorothy, take care of his enemies, i.e. the Wicked Witch. Other scholars, such as Hugh Rockoff, suggest the cyclone itself was representative of political upheaval. The yellow brick road is gold. The silver shoes is for the pro-silver movement. And even the path she takes to see the wizard, which is 7 passages and 3 flights of stairs, as reference to the Coinage Act of 1873, which was also considered the crime of 73, which is believed to have started the class conflict in America because it reinforced a gold standard, meaning people who had silver could no longer turn it into silver dollars. Gold, which was more expensive, could still be made into money. It also eliminated 3 smaller denominations of coins, so it really affected the middle class and the poor. So if anyone questions all of this and why it's, political, in 1902, Baum wrote a musical in conjunction with some other people, which had explicit political commentary and went so far as to comment on John D. Rockefeller and his involvement in oil. Like at one point, the Tin Man makes a comment about running out of oil, and they said it wouldn't be as bad as if John D. Rockefeller lost it, which he would lose like $6,000 a day or something like that. So it did have rather explicit imagery. And this is just a little map of Oz. I know it's a bit hard to see, but if you look up top, we have Gillikin Country. This is actually what's in my book. It's just mine is black and white. We have Munchkin Country, Munchkin Land. We have the Emerald City in the middle. We have Winky Country and Quadling Country. Not all of these are present in the first book. And then we have deserts on the outside, Great Sandy Waste, the Deadly Desert. If you no, Return to Oz, the Deadly Desert is present in some of it. Anything that touches it dies. So it's really rather lovely, I guess. So let me drag myself back in. Okay, and we are done with our presentation. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. I will attempt to answer them. And now we get into the reading. So let's begin our story. Alright, so we are starting with The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Are these areas all factioned off by economy class? You know, that's a good question. I'm actually not sure. It is it's like a Sherpa blankie with cats. Yes, I'm actually gonna have to look that up, Eric. That's a really good question. Let me write that down for myself. Hold on. Is the land in Oz sectioned off? I know that I don't know about economy class. I do know it's by, you know, race. You have the Munchkins, you have the Winkies and such like that. Gold star for me, yes, I do love answering questions, and I will have an answer for you, for hopefully next class. Hopefully I will have that. Okay. If you have other questions, feel free to put them in chat, or feel free to throw them in the Discord. So, Chapter 1, The Cyclone. Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas prairies with Uncle Henry, who was a farmer, and Aunt Em, who was the farmer's wife. Their house was small, for the lumber to build it had to be carried by wagon many miles. There were 4 walls, a floor and a roof, which made one room, and this room contained a rusty-looking cook stove, a cupboard for the dishes, a table, 3 or 4 chairs, and the beds. Uncle Henry and Aunt Em had a big bed in one corner, and Dorothy had a little bed in another corner. There was no garret at all, and no cellar, except a small hole dug in the ground, called a cyclone cellar, where the family would go in case one of those great whirlwinds arose, mighty enough to crush any building in its path. It was reached by a trap door in the middle of the floor, from which a ladder led down into the small, dark hole. So you're just PM me? Sure, will do. When Dorothy stood in the doorway and looked around, she could see nothing but the great gray prairie on every side. Not a tree nor a house broke the broad sweep of flat country that reached to the edge of the sky in all directions. The sun had baked the plowed land into a gray mass, with little cracks running through it. Even the grass was not green, for the sun had burned the tops of the long blades until they were the same gray color to be seen everywhere. Once the house had been painted, but the sun blistered the paint and the rains washed it away, and now the house was as dull and gray as everything else. When Aunt Em came there to live, she was a young, pretty wife. The sun and wind had changed her, too. They had taken the sparkle from her eyes and left them a sober gray. They had taken the red from her cheeks and lips, and they were gray also. She was thin and gaunt and never smiled now. When Dorothy, who was an orphan, first came to her, Aunt Em had been so startled by the child's laughter that she would scream and press her hand upon her heart whenever Dorothy's merry voice reached her ears. And she still looked at the little girl with wonder that she could find anything to laugh at. Uncle Henry never laughed. He worked hard from morning till night and did not know what joy was. He was gray also, from his long beard to his rough boots, and he looked stern and solemn and rarely spoke. It was Toto that made Dorothy laugh, and saved her from going as gray as her other surroundings. Toto was not gray. He was a little black dog with long silky hair and small black eyes that twinkled merrily on either side of his funny wee nose. Toto played all day long, and Dorothy played with him and loved him dearly. Today, however, they were not playing. Uncle Henry sat upon the doorstep and looked anxiously at the sky, which is even grayer than usual. Dorothy stood in the door with Toto in her arms and looked at the sky too. Aunt Em was washing the dishes. Far from the far north they heard a low wail of the wind, and Uncle Henry and Dorothy could see where the long grass bowed in waves before the coming storm. There now came a sharp whistling in the air from the south, and as they turned their eyes that way, they saw ripples in the grass coming from that direction also. Suddenly Uncle Henry stood up. "There's a cyclone coming, Em," he called to his wife. "I'll go look after the stock." Then he ran toward the sheds where the cows and horses were kept. Aunt Em dropped her work and came to the door. One glance told her of the danger close at hand. "Quick, Dorothy," she screamed. "Run for the cellar." Toto jumped out of Dorothy's arms and hid under the bed, and the girls started to get him. Aunt Em, badly frightened, threw open the trap door in the floor and climbed down the ladder into the small, dark hole. Dorothy caught Toto in last and started to follow her aunt. When she was halfway across the room, there came a great shriek from the wind, and the house shook so hard that she lost her footing and sat down suddenly upon the floor. Then a strange thing happened. The house whirled around 2 or 3 times and rose slowly through the air. Dorothy felt like as if she were going up in a balloon. The north and south winds met where the house stood and made it the exact center of the cyclone. In the middle of a cyclone, the air is generally still, but the great pressure on the wind on every side of the house raised it up higher and higher until it was at the very top of the cyclone, and there it remained and was carried miles and miles away as easily as you could carry a feather. It was very dark, and the wind howled horribly around her, but Dorothy found she was riding quite easily. After the first few whirls around, and one other time when the house tipped badly, she felt as if she were being rocked gently, like a baby in a cradle. Toto did not like it. He ran about the room, now here, now there, barking loudly, but Dorothy sat quite still on the floor and waited to see what would happen. Once Toto got too near the open trap door and fell in, and at first the little girl thought she had lost him. But soon she saw one of his ears sticking up through the hole, for the strong pressure of the air was keeping him up so he could not fall. She crept to the hole, caught Toto by the ear, and dragged him into the room again, afterward closing the trap door so that no more accidents could happen. Hour after hour passed away, and slowly Dorothy got over her fright. But she felt quite lonely, and the wind shrieked so loudly all about her that she nearly became deaf. At first she had wondered if she would be dashed to pieces when the house fell again, but as the hours passed and nothing terrible happened, she stopped worrying and resolved to wait calmly and see what the future would bring. At last she crawled over the swaying floor to her bed, and lay down upon it, and Toto followed and lay down beside her. In spite of the swaying of the house and the wailing of the wind, Dorothy soon closed her eyes and fell fast asleep. Chapter 2. The Council of the Munchkins. She was awakened by a shock, so sudden and severe that if Dorothy had not been lying on the soft bed, she might have been hurt. As it was, the jar made her catch her breath and wonder what had happened, and Toto put his cold little nose into her face and whined dismally. Dorothy sat up and noticed that the house was not moving, nor was it dark, for the bright sunshine came in at the window, flooding the little room. She sprang from her bed, and with Toto at her heels ran and opened the door. The little girl gave a cry of amazement and looked about her, her eyes growing bigger and bigger at the wonderful sights she saw. The cyclone had set the house down very gently, for a cyclone, in the midst of a country of marvelous beauty. There were lovely patches of greensward all about, with stately trees bearing rich and luscious fruits. Banks of gorgeous flowers were on every hand, and birds with rare and brilliant plumage sang and fluttered in the trees and bushes. A little way off was a small brook, rushing and sparkling along between green banks, and murmuring in a voice very grateful to a little girl who had lived so long on the dry, gray prairies. While she stood looking eagerly at the strange and beautiful sights, she noticed coming toward her a group of the queerest people she had ever seen. They were not as big as the grown folks she had always been used to, but neither were they very small. In fact, they seemed about as tall as Dorothy, who was a well-grown child for her age, although they were, so far as looks go, many years older. 3 were men and 1 a woman, and all were oddly dressed. They wore round hats that rose to a small point a foot above their heads, with little bells around the brims that tinkled sweetly as they moved. The hats of the men were blue, the little woman's hat was white, and she wore a white gown that hung in pleats from her shoulders. Over it were sprinkled little stars that glistened in the sun like diamonds. The men were dressed in blue of the same shade as their hats, and wore well-polished boots with a deep roll of blue at the tops. The men, Dorothy thought, were about as old as Uncle Henry, for 2 of them had beards. The little woman was doubtless much older. Her face was covered with wrinkles, her hair was nearly white, and she walked rather stiffly. When these people drew near the house where Dorothy was standing in the doorway, they paused and whispered among themselves as if afraid to come farther. But the little old woman walked up to Dorothy, made a low bow, and said in a sweet voice, "You are welcome, most noble sorceress, to the land of the Munchkins. We are so grateful to you for having killed the Wicked Witch of the East and for setting our people free from bondage." Dorothy listened to the speech with wonder. What could the little woman possibly mean by calling her a sorceress and saying she had killed the Wicked Witch of the East? Dorothy was an innocent, harmless little girl who had been carried off by a cyclone many miles from home, and she had never killed anything in all her life. But the little woman evidently expected her to answer, so Dorothy said with hesitation, "You are very kind, but there must be some mistake. I have not killed anything." "Your house did, anyway," replied the little old woman with a laugh, "and that is the same thing. See?" she continued, pointing to the corner of the house. "There are her 2 feet, still sticking out from under a block of wood." Dorothy looked and gave a little cry of fright. There, indeed, just under the corner of the great beam the house rested on, 2 feet were sticking out, shod in silver shoes with pointed toes. Manslaughter? Yes. Vehicular manslaughter? I mean, the house was being used as a vehicle. That's a good question. Would it be called vehicular manslaughter, everyone? Chat, what do you think about that one? Is it vehicular manslaughter if the house is being used as transportation and drops on someone and kills them? I'm not sure. That's a good one. Dorothy looked and gave a little cry of fright. You vote yes. Hi, blah, blah. Dorothy looked and gave a little cry of fright. There, indeed, just under the corner of the great beam the house rested on, 2 feet were sticking out, shod in silver shoes with pointed toes. "Oh dear," cried Dorothy, clasping her hands together in dismay. "The house must have fallen on her. Whatever shall we do?" "There's nothing to be done," said the little woman calmly. "But who was she?" asked Dorothy. "She was the Wicked Witch of the East, as I said," answered the little woman. "She has held all the Munchkins in bondage for many years, making them slave for her night and day. Now they are all set free and are grateful to you for the favor." "Who are the Munchkins?" inquired Dorothy. "They are the people who live in this land of the East where the Wicked Witch ruled." "Are you a Munchkin?" asked Dorothy. "No, but I am their friend, although I live in the land of the North. When they saw the Witch of the East was dead, the Munchkins sent a swift messenger to me, and I came at once. I am the Witch of the North." "Oh, gracious!" cried Dorothy. "Are you a real witch?" "Yes, indeed," answered the little woman. "But I am a good witch, and the people love me. I am not as powerful as the Wicked Witch was who ruled here, or I should have set the people free myself." I don't know if I can do a poll. Was the house intentional transportation, or did it become transport unwillingly so? Hi, Cosmix. I'd say unwilling as well because of the tornado. Yes, he does like the word bondage, but it's used differently. Remember the context, Eric. You say nay? I'm going to put this poll on my Twitter. It's an interesting one. "But I thought all witches were wicked," said the girl, who was half frightened at facing a real witch. "Oh, no, that is a great mistake. There were only 4 witches in all the land of Oz, and 2 of them, those who live in the north and the south, are good witches. I know this is true, for I am one of them myself and cannot be mistaken. Those who dwelt in the east and the west were, indeed, wicked witches. But now that you have killed one of them, there is but one wicked witch in all the land of Oz, the one that lives in the west." "But," said Dorothy after a moment's thought, "Aunt Em has told me that the witches were all dead, years and years ago." "Who is Aunt Em?" inquired the little old woman. "She is my aunt who lives in Kansas, where I came from." The witch in the north seemed to think for a time, with her head bowed and her eyes upon the ground. Then she looked up and said, I do not know where Kansas is, for I've never heard that country mentioned before. But tell me, is it a civilized country? Oh, yes, replied Dorothy. Then that accounts for it. In the civilized countries, I believe there are no witches left, nor wizards, nor sorceresses, nor magicians. But, you see, the land of Oz has never been civilized, for we are cut off from all the rest of the world. Therefore, we still have witches and wizards amongst us. Who are the wizards? Asked Dorothy. Oz himself is the great wizard, answered the witch, sinking her voice to a whisper. He is more powerful than all the rest of us together. He lives in the City of Emeralds. Dorothy was going to ask another question, but just then the Munchkins, who had been standing silently by, gave a loud shout and pointed to the corner of the house where the Wicked Witch had been lying. What is that? What is it? Asked the little old woman, and looked and began to laugh. The feet of the dead witch had disappeared entirely, and nothing was left but the silver shoes. She was so old, explained the Witch of the North, that she dried up quickly in the sun. That is the end of her. But the silver shoes are yours, and you shall have to wear them. She reached down and picked up the shoes, and after shaking the dust out of them, handed them to Dorothy. The Witch of the East was proud of those silver shoes, said one of the Munchkins, and there is some charm connected with them, but what it is we never knew. Dorothy carried the shoes into the house and placed them on the table. Then she came out again to the Munchkins and said, I am anxious to get back to my aunt and uncle, for I am sure they will worry about me. Can you help me find my way? The Munchkins and the witches first looked at one another, and then at Dorothy, and then shook their heads. At the east, not far from here, said one, there is a great desert, and none could live to cross it. It is the same at the south, said another, for I have been there and seen it. The south is the country of the Quadlings. I am told, said the third man, that it is the same of the west, and that country where the Winkies live is ruled by the Wicked Witch of the West, who would make you her slave if you passed her way. The north is my home, said the old lady, and at its edge is the same great desert that surrounds this land of Oz. I'm afraid, my dear, you will have to live with us. Dorothy began to sob at this, for she felt lonely among all these strange people. But tears seemed to grieve the kind-hearted Munchkins, for they immediately took out their handkerchiefs and began to weep also. As for the little old woman, she took off her cap and balanced the point on the end of her nose, while she counted 1, 2, 3 in a solemn voice. At once the cap changed to a slate on which was written in big white chalk marks, Let Dorothy go to the City of Emeralds. I think the term would be involuntary manslaughter because she was the only occupant at the house at the time of death. Dorothy wants it would be an accidental death by natural events. By natural events, act of God. Yeah, that's a good point. I'll agree to that. The little old woman took the slate from her nose, and having read the words on it, asked, Is your name Dorothy, my dear? Yes, answered the child, looking up and drying her tears. Then you must go to the City of Emeralds. Perhaps Oz will help you. Where is the city? Asked Dorothy. It is exactly in the center of the country and is ruled by Oz, the great wizard I told you of. Is he a good man? Inquired the girl anxiously. He is a good wizard. Whether he is a man or not I cannot tell, for I have never seen him. How can I get there? Asked Dorothy. You must walk. It is a long journey through a country that is sometimes pleasant and sometimes dark and terrible. However, I will use all the magic arts I know of to keep you from harm. Won't you go with me? Pleaded the girl, who had begun to look upon the little old woman as her only friend. No, I cannot do that, she replied, but I will give you my kiss, and no one will dare injure a person who has been kissed by the Witch of the North. She came close to Dorothy and kissed her gently on the forehead. Where her lips touched the girl, they left a round, shining mark, as Dorothy found out soon after. The road to the City of Emeralds is paved with yellow brick, said the witch, so you cannot miss it. When you get to Oz, do not be afraid of him, but tell your story and ask him to help you. Goodbye, my dear. The three Munchkins bowed low to her and wished her a pleasant journey, after which they walked away through the trees. The witch gave Dorothy a friendly little nod, whirled around on her left heel 3 times, and straightway disappeared, much to the surprise of little Toto, who barked after her loudly enough when she had gone, because he had been afraid even to growl while she stood by. But Dorothy, knowing her to be a witch, had expected her to disappear in just that way, and was not surprised in the least. Thank you for redeeming attendance, Cosmics. Let me readjust myself. What are you thinking of the story so far? There's some parts that are definitely different from the movie. The age of Dorothy, for one. How Dorothy saved the scarecrow. When Dorothy was left alone, she began to feel hungry. So she went to the cupboard and cut herself some bread. Shocked at the differences? Yeah, there's a lot more too coming up. So she went to the cupboard and cut herself some bread, which she spread with butter. She gave some to Toto, and taking a pail from the shelf, she carried it down to the little brook and filled it with clear, sparkling water. Toto ran over to the trees and began to bark at the birds sitting there. Dorothy went to get him and saw such delicious fruit hanging from the branches that she gathered some of it, finding it just what she wanted to help out her breakfast. My blanket does get fuzzier every time you come here. Changes colors. I have actually never read the novel itself. I've seen the movie a billion times because it's my youngest sibling's absolute favorite film. I've read part of the original, but not the full thing. And I haven't read any of the others after this. Then she went back to the house, and having helped herself and Toto to a good drink of the cool, clear water, she set about making ready for the journey to the City of Emeralds. Dorothy had only one other dress, but that happened to be clean and was hanging on a peg beside her bed. It was gingham, with checks of white and blue, and although the blue was somewhat faded with many washings, it was still a pretty frock. The girl washed herself carefully, dressed herself in the clean gingham, and tied her pink sunbonnet on her head. She took a little basket and filled it with bread from the cupboard, laying a white cloth over the top. Then she looked down at her feet and noticed how old and worn her shoes were. "They surely will never do for a long journey, Toto," she said, and Toto looked up into her face with his little black eyes and wagged his tail to show he knew what she meant. At that moment, Dorothy saw laying on the table the silver shoes that had belonged to the Witch of the East. "I wonder if they will fit me," she said to Toto. "They would be just the thing to take a long walk in, for they could not wear out." She took off her old leather shoes and tried on the silver ones, which fitted her as well as if they had been made for her. Finally, she picked up her basket. 30s Hollywood idolized lots of things, so I can see how some things were changed. Yeah, they did. And plus, at the time, you got to remember that this was the first film that utilized color. So the whole gray aspect of the original scene is actually very fitting, and for it to go into color is actually perfect for the film itself. So that's one thing that they did really well. And I think if I remember correctly, and if Matsu was here, he could correct me, the availability of color came while they were filming, so that's why they made the choice, I believe. I can't quite remember. I'll have to look into it. Matsu, where are you? "Come along, Toto," she said. "We will go to the Emerald City and ask the Great Oz how to get back to Kansas again." She closed the door, locked it, and put the key carefully in the pocket of her dress. And so, with Toto trotting along soberly behind her, she started on her journey. There were silver roads nearby, but it did not take her long to find the one paved with yellow bricks. Within a short time she was walking briskly toward the Emerald City, with her silver shoes tinkling merrily on the hard yellow roadbed. The sun shone bright and the birds sang sweetly, and Dorothy did not feel nearly so bad as you might think a little girl would who had been suddenly whisked away from her own country and set down in the midst of a strange land. She was surprised, as she walked along, to see how pretty the country was about her. There were neat fences at the sides of the road, painted a dainty blue color, and beyond them were fields of grain and vegetables in abundance. Evidently, the Munchkins were good farmers and able to raise large crops. Once in a while she would pass a house, and the people came out to look at her and bow low as she went by, for everyone knew she had been the means of destroying the wicked witch and setting them free from bondage. The houses of the Munchkins were odd-looking dwellings, for each was round and with a big dome for a roof. All were painted blue, for in this country of the East, blue was the favorite color. Toward evening, when Dorothy was tired with her long walk and began to wonder where she would pass the night, she came to a house rather larger than the rest. On the green lawn before it, many men and women were dancing. 5 little fiddlers played as loudly as possible, and the people were laughing and singing, while the big table nearby was loaded with delicious fruits and nuts, pies and cakes, and many other good things to eat. The people greeted Dorothy kindly and invited her to supper and to pass the night with them, for this was the home of one of the richest Munchkins in the land, and his friends were gathered with him to celebrate their freedom from the bondage of the Wicked Witch. Dorothy ate a hearty supper and was waited upon by the rich Munchkin himself, whose name was Bock. Then she sat upon a settee and watched the people dance. When Bock saw her silver shoes, he said, "You must be a great sorceress." "Why?" asked the girl. "Because you wear silver shoes and have killed the Wicked Witch. Besides, you have white in your frock, and only witches and sorceresses wear white." "My dress is blue and white checked," said Dorothy, smoothing out the wrinkles in it. "It is kind of you to wear that," said Bock. "Blue is the color of the Munchkins, and white is the witch color, so we know you are a friendly witch." Dorothy did not know what to say to this, for all the people seemed to think her a witch, and she knew very well she was only an ordinary little girl who had come by the chance of a cyclone into a strange land. When she had tired watching the dancing, Bock led her into the house, where he gave her a room with a pretty bed in it. The sheets were made of blue cloth, and Dorothy slept soundly in them till morning, with Toto curled up on the blue rug beside her. She ate a hearty breakfast, and watched a wee Munchkin baby, who played with Toto and pulled his tail, and crowed and laughed in a way that greatly amused Dorothy. Toto was a fine curiosity to all the people, for they had never seen a dog before. "How far is it to the Emerald City?" the girl asked. "I do not know," answered Bock gravely, "for I have never been there. It is better for people to keep away from Oz, unless they have business with him. But it is a long way to the Emerald City, and it will take you many days. The country here is rich and pleasant, but you must pass through rough and dangerous places before you reach the end of your journey." This worried Dorothy a little, but she knew that only the great Oz could help her get to Kansas again, so she bravely resolved not to turn back. She bade her friends goodbye and again started along the road of yellow brick. When she had gone several miles, she thought she would stop to rest, and so climbed on top of the fence beside the road and sat down. There was a great cornfield beyond the fence, and not far away she saw a scarecrow, placed high on a pole to keep the birds from the ripe corn. Dorothy leaned her chin upon her hand and gazed thoughtfully at the scarecrow. Its head was a small sack stuffed with straw, with eyes, nose, and mouth painted on it to represent a face. An old, pointed blue hat, that had belonged to some Munchkin, was perched on his head, and the rest of the figure was a blue suit of clothes, worn and faded, which had also been stuffed with straw. On the feet were some old boots with blue tops, such as every man wore in this country, and the figure was raised above the stalks of corn by means of the pole stuck up its back. Yes, technicolor. That was the word I was looking for, technicolor. Thank you, Bloodlet. While Dorothy was looking earnestly into the queer painted face of the scarecrow, she was surprised to see one of the eyes slowly wink at her. She thought she must have been mistaken at first, for none of the scarecrows in Kansas ever wink, but presently the figure nodded its head to her in a friendly way. Then she climbed down from the fence and walked up to it, while Toto ran around the pole and barked. "Good day," said the scarecrow in a rather husky voice. "Did you speak?" asked the girl in wonder. "Certainly," answered the scarecrow. "How do you do?" "I'm pretty well, thank you," replied Dorothy politely. "How do you do?" "I'm not feeling well," said the scarecrow with a smile, "for it is very tedious being perched up here night and day to scare away crows." "Can't you get down?" asked Dorothy. I remember the story that they found the slippers after like 15 years of them missing, and then they suddenly reappeared. Weird that they went missing. Yeah, it's really strange. Also, there was more than one pair of shoes. The ruby slippers. There was several pairs, and if you go to... I have been to DC and I've seen them, and they're most definitely not as beautiful as they are in the film. They're definitely old and rough. "No, for this pole is stuck up my back. If you will please take away the pole, I shall be greatly obliged to you." Dorothy reached up both arms and lifted the figure off the pole, for, being stuffed with straw, it was quite light. "Thank you very much," said the Scarecrow when he had been set down on the ground. "I feel like a new man." Dorothy was puzzled at this, for it sounded queer to hear a stuffed man speak, and to see him bow and walk along beside her. "Who are you?" asked the Scarecrow when he had stretched himself and yawned. "And where are you going?" "My name is Dorothy," said the girl, "and I am going to the Emerald City to ask the Great Oz to send me back to Kansas." "Where is the Emerald City?" he inquired, "and who is Oz?" Yeah, that's true. And the sequins of them there's quite a few missing. They're in a glass case now, so you can't touch them. But still, they're pretty rough. What's a Scarecrow's favorite fruit? A strawberry. Blah, blah. A strawberry. Why, don't you know? She returned in surprise. "No, indeed, I don't know anything. You see, I'm stuffed, so I have no brains at all," he answered sadly. "Oh," said Dorothy, "I'm awfully sorry for you." "Do you think," he asked, "if I go to the Emerald City with you, that Oz would give me some brains?" "I cannot tell," she returned, "but you may come with me if you like. If Oz will not give you any brains, you will be no worse off than you are now." "That is true," said the Scarecrow. "You see," he continued confidently, "I don't mind my legs and arms and body being stuffed, because I cannot get hurt. If anyone treads on my toes or sticks a pin into me, it doesn't matter, for I can't feel it. But I do not want people to call me a fool, and if my head stays stuffed with straw instead of with brains, as yours is, how am I ever to know anything?" "I understand how you feel," said the little girl, who was truly sorry for him. "If you will come with me, I'll ask Oz to do all he can for you." "Thank you," he answered gratefully. They walked back to the road. Dorothy helped him over the fence, and they started along the path of yellow brick for the Emerald City. Toto did not like this addition to the party at first. He smelled around the stuffed man as if he suspected there might be a nest of rats in the straw, and he often growled in an unfriendly way at the Scarecrow. "Don't mind Toto," said Dorothy to her new friend. "He never bites." "Oh, I'm not afraid," replied the Scarecrow. "He can't hurt the straw. Do let me carry that basket for you. I shall not mind it, for I can't get tired. I'll tell you a secret," he continued as he walked along. "There is only one thing in the world I am afraid of." "What is that?" asked Dorothy. "The Munchkin farmer who made you?" "No," answered the Scarecrow. "It's a lighted match." Yes, the glass case, no oxygen, less deterioration. Correct, Eric. And next chapter, The Road Through the Forest. After a few hours, the road began to be rough, and the walking grew so difficult that the Scarecrow often stumbled over the yellow bricks, which here were very uneven. Sometimes, indeed, they were broken or missing altogether, leaving holes that Toto jumped across, and Dorothy walked around. As for the Scarecrow, having no brains, he walked straight ahead, and so he stepped into the holes and fell at full length on the hard bricks. It never hurt him, however, and Dorothy would pick him up and set him upon his feet again, while he joined her in laughing merrily at his own mishap. Ooh, hydrate. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. The farms were not nearly so well cared for here as they were farther back. There were fewer houses and fewer fruit trees, and the farther they went, the more dismal and lonesome the country became. At noon they sat down by the roadside near a little brook, and Dorothy opened her basket and got out some bread. She offered a piece to the Scarecrow, but he refused. "I am never hungry," he said, "and it is a lucky thing I am not, for my mouth is only painted, and if I should cut a hole in it so I could eat, the straw I am stuffed with would come out, and that would spoil the shape of my head." Dorothy saw at once that this was true, so she only nodded and went on eating her bread. "Tell me something about yourself and the country you came from," said the Scarecrow when she had finished her dinner. So she told him all about Kansas and how gray everything was there, and how the cyclone had carried her to this queer land of Oz. The Scarecrow listened carefully and said, "I cannot understand why you should wish to leave this beautiful country and go back to the dry, gray place you call Kansas. That is because you have no brains, answered the girl. No matter how dreary and gray our homes are, what'd you say? No matter how dreary and gray our homes are, we people of flesh and blood would rather live here than in any other country, be it ever so beautiful. There is no place like home. That is apparently something that is not from there. Let me sec. There is no place like home. The Scarecrow sighed. Of course I cannot understand it, he said. If your heads were stuffed in straw like mine, you would probably all live in the beautiful places, and then Kansas would have no people at all. It is fortunate for Kansas that you have brains. Won't you tell me a story while we are resting? Asked the child. Welcome in, Annabeth. The Scarecrow looked at her reproachfully and answered, My life has been so short that I really know nothing whatever. I was only made day before yesterday. What happened in the world before that time is all unknown to me. Luckily, when the farmer made my head, one of the first things he did was to paint my ears, so that I heard what was going on. There was another munchkin with him, and the first thing I heard was the farmer saying, How do you like those ears? They aren't straight, answered the other. Never mind, said the farmer. They are ears just the same, which was true enough. Now I'll make the eyes, said the farmer. So he painted my right eye, and as soon as it was finished, I found myself looking at him and at everything around me with a great deal of curiosity, and for this was my first glimpse of the world. That's a rather pretty eye, remarked the munchkin, who was watching the farmer. Blue paint is just the color for eyes. I think I'll make the other a little bigger, said the farmer. And then the second eye was done, I could see much better than before. Then he made my nose and my mouth. But I did not speak because at that time I didn't know what a mouth was for. I had the fun of watching them make my body and arms and legs, when they fastened on my head at last I felt very proud, for I thought I was just as good a man as anyone. This fellow will scare the crows fast enough, said the farmer. He looks just like a man. Surprise tool that'll help us later. Yes. Why, he is a man, said the other, and I quite agreed with him. The farmer carried me under his arm to the cornfield and set me up on a tall stick where you found me. He and his friends soon after walked away and left me alone. I did not like to be deserted this way, so I tried to walk after them, but my feet would not touch the ground, and I was forced to stay on that pole. It was a lonely life to lead, for I had nothing to think of, having been made such a little while before. Many crows and other birds flew into the cornfield, but as soon as they saw me, they flew away again, thinking I was a munchkin, and this pleased me and made me feel that I was quite an important person. By and by an old crow flew near me, and after looking at me carefully, he perched upon my shoulder and said, I wonder if that farmer thought to fool me in this clumsy manner. Any crow of sense could see that you were only stuffed with straw. Then he hopped down at my feet and ate all the corn he wanted. The other birds, seeing he was not harmed by me, came to eat the corn too, so in a short time there was a great flock of them about me. I felt sad at this, for it showed I was not such a good scarecrow after all, but the old crow comforted me, saying, If you only had brains in your head, you would be as good a man as any of them, and a better man than some of them. Brains are the only things worth having in this world, no matter whether one is a crow or a man. After the crows had gone, I thought this over and decided I would try hard to get some brains. By good luck, you came along and pulled me off the stake, and for what you say, I am sure the Great Oz will give me brains as soon as we get to the Emerald City. I hope so, said Dorothy earnestly, since you seem anxious to have them. Oh yes, I am anxious, returned the Scarecrow. It is such an uncomfortable feeling to know one is a fool. Well, said the girl, let us go, and she handed the basket to the Scarecrow. There were no fences at all by the roadside now, and the land was rough and untilled. Toward evening they came to a great forest, where the trees were so big and close together that their branches met over the road of yellow brick. It was almost dark under the trees, for the branches shut out the daylight, but the travelers did not stop and went on into the forest. If this road goes in, it must come out, said the Scarecrow, and as the Emerald City is at the other end of the road, we must go wherever it leads us. Anyone would know that, said Dorothy. Certainly, that is why I know it, returned the Scarecrow. If it required brains to figure out, I never should have said it. After an hour or so, the light faded away, and they found themselves stumbling along in the darkness. Dorothy could not see at all, but Toto could, for some dogs see very well in the dark. and the Scarecrow declared he could see as well as by day, so she took hold of his arm and managed to get along fairly well. "If you see any house or any place where we can pass the night," she said, "you must tell me, for it is very uncomfortable walking in the dark." Soon after, the Scarecrow stopped. "I see a little cottage to the right of us," he said, "built of logs and branches. Shall we go there?" "Yes, indeed," answered the child. "I am all tired out." So the Scarecrow led her through the trees until they reached the cottage, and Dorothy entered and found a bed of dried leaves in one corner. She lay down at once, with Toto beside her, soon fell into a sound sleep. The Scarecrow, who was never tired, stood up in another corner and waited patiently until morning came. Next chapter, The Rescue of the Tin Woodsman. When Dorothy awoke, the sun was shining through the trees, and Toto had long been out chasing birds around him and squirrels. She sat up and looked around her, Scarecrow still standing patiently in his corner waiting for her. "We must go and search for water," she said to him. "Why do you want water?" she asked. "To wash my face clean after the dust of the road, and to drink, so the dry bread will not stick in my throat." Yay, we get to the Tin Man! "It must be inconvenient to be made of flesh," said the Scarecrow thoughtfully, "for you must sleep and eat and drink. However, you have brains, and it is worth a lot of bother to be able to think properly." "Hi, Raven! Welcome in! We have the Tin Lad. Everyone make yourselves comfortable." They left the cottage and walked through the trees until they found a little spring of clear water, where Dorothy drank and bathed and ate her breakfast. She saw there was not much bread left in the basket, and the girl was thankful the Scarecrow did not have to eat anything, for there was scarcely enough for herself and Toto for the day. When she had finished her meal and was about to go back to the road of yellow brick, she was startled to hear a deep groan nearby. "What was that?" she asked timidly. "I cannot imagine," replied the Scarecrow, "but we can go and see." Just then another groan reached their ears, and the sound seemed to come from behind them. They turned and walked through the forest a few steps, when Dorothy discovered something shining in a ray of sunshine that fell between the trees. She ran to the place and then stopped short with a little cry of surprise. It's one heartless dude, yeah. Being brainless, heartless. One of the big trees had been partly chopped through, and standing beside it, with an uplifted axe in his hands, was a man made entirely of tin. His head and arms and legs were jointed upon his body, and he stood perfectly motionless, as if he could not stir at all. Dorothy looked at him in amazement, and so did the Scarecrow, while Toto barked sharply and made a snap at the tin legs, which hurt his teeth. "Did you groan?" asked them Dorothy. "Yes," answered the Tin Man, "I did. I have been groaning for more than a year, and no one has ever heard me before or come to help me." "What can I do for you?" she inquired softly, for she was moved by the sad voice in which the man spoke. "Get an oil can and oil my joints," he answered. "They are rusted so badly that I cannot move them at all. If I am well oiled, I shall soon be all right again. You will find an oil can on a shelf in my cottage." Dorothy at once ran back to the cottage and found the oil can, and then returned and asked anxiously, "Where are your joints?" "Oil my neck first," replied the Tin Man. So she oiled it, and as it was quite badly rusted, the Scarecrow took hold of the tin head and moved it gently from side to side until it worked freely, and then the man could turn it himself. "Now oil the joints in my arms," he said, and Dorothy oiled them, and the Scarecrow bent them carefully until they were quite free from rust and as good as new. The Tin Woodman gave a sigh of satisfaction and lowered his axe, which he leaned against the tree. "This is a great comfort," he said. "I have been holding that axe in the air ever since I rusted, and I'm glad to be able to put it down at last. Now, if you will oil the joints of my legs, I shall be all right once more." My bodily joints, yes. So they oiled his legs until he could move them freely, and he thanked them again and again for his release, for he seemed a very polite creature and very grateful. "I might have stood there always if you had not come along," he said. "So you have certainly saved my life. How did you happen to be here?" We are on our way to the Emerald City to see the Great Oz," she answered, "and we stopped at your cottage to pass the night." "Why do you wish to see Oz?" he asked. "I want him to send me back to Kansas, and the Scarecrow wants him to put a few brains into his head," she replied. The Tin Woodman appeared to think deeply for a moment. Then he said, "Do you suppose Oz could give me a heart?" "Why, I guess so," Aunt Dorothy answered. "It would be as easy as to give the Scarecrow brains." "True," the Tin Woodman returned. "So, if you will allow me to join your party, I will also go to the Emerald City and ask Oz to help me." "Come along," said the Scarecrow heartily, and Dorothy added that she would be pleased to have his company. So the Tin Woodman shouldered his axe, and they all passed through the forest until they came to the road that was paved with yellow brick. The Tin Woodman had asked Dorothy to put the oil can in her basket. "For," he said, "if I should get caught in the rain and rust again, I would need the oil can badly." It was a bit of good luck to have their new comrade join the party, for soon after they had begun their journey again, they came to a place where the trees and branches grew so thick over the road that the travelers could not pass. But the Tin Woodman set to work with his axe and chopped so well that soon he cleared a passage for the entire party. Dorothy was thinking so earnestly as they walked along that she did not notice when the Scarecrow stumbled into a hole and rolled over to the side of the road. Indeed, he was obliged to call to her to help him up again. "Why didn't you walk around the hole?" asked the Tin Woodman. "I don't know enough," replied the Scarecrow cheerfully. "My head is stuffed with straw, you know, and that is why I'm going to Oz to ask him for some brains." "Oh, I see," said the Tin Woodman. "But, after all, brains are not the best things in the world." "Have you any?" inquired the Scarecrow. "No, my head is quite empty," answered the Woodman. "But once I had brains and a heart also. So, having tried them both, I should much rather have a heart." "And why is that?" asked the Scarecrow. "I will tell my story, and then you will know." So, while they were walking through the forest, the Tin Woodman told the following story. "I was born the son of a woodman who chopped down trees in the forest and sold them for a living. When I grew up, I too became a wood chopper, and after my father died, I took care of my old mother as long as she lived. Then I made up my mind that instead of living alone, I would marry so that I might not become lonely. There was one of the Munchkin girls who was so beautiful that I soon grew to love her with all my heart. She, on her part, promised to marry me as soon as I could earn enough money to build a better house for her, so I set to work harder than ever. But the girl lived with an old woman who did not want her to marry anyone, for she was so lazy she wished the girl to remain with her and do the cooking and the housework. So the old woman went to the Wicked Witch of the East and promised her 2 sheep and a cow if she would prevent the marriage. Thereupon the Wicked Witch enchanted my axe, and when I was chopping away at my best one day, for I was anxious to get the new house and my wife as soon as possible, the axe slipped all at once and cut off my left leg. And here we get gore. This at first seemed a great misfortune, for I knew a one-legged man who could not do very well as a wood chopper. So I went to a tinsmith and had him make a new leg out of tin. The leg worked very well once I was used to it, but my action angered the Wicked Witch of the East, for she had promised the old woman I should not marry the pretty Munchkin girl. When I began chopping again, my axe slipped and cut off my right leg. Again I went to the tinsmith, and again he made me a leg out of tin. After this, the enchanted axe cut off my arms, one after the other, but, nothing daunted, I had them replaced with tin ones. The Wicked Witch then made the axe slip and cut off my head, and at first I thought that was the end of me. The tinsmith happened to come along and made me a new head of tin. I thought I had beaten the Wicked Witch then, and I worked harder than ever, but I little knew how cruel my enemy could be. She thought of a new way to kill my love for the beautiful Munchkin maiden, and made my axe slip again so that it cut right through my body, splitting me into 2 halves. Once more the tinsmith came to my help and made me a body of tin, fastening my tin arms and legs and head to it by means of joints, so that I could move around as well as ever. But, alas, I had now no heart, so that I lost my love for the Munchkin girl, and did not care whether I married her or not. I suppose she is still living with the old woman, waiting for me to come after her. It's scary being intelligent rather than be caring and naive rather than knowing. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, I gotta agree with that. Being intelligent can be a scary thing. A great misfortune, that's an understatement. Yeah, really gory for a children's book, too, but at the same time, fairy tales were not pleasant either. Though I don't think this would be published in this day and age. My body shone so brightly in the sun that I felt very proud of it, and it did not matter now if my axe slipped, for it could not cut me. There was only one danger, that my joints would rust, but I kept an oil can in my cottage and took care to oil myself whenever I needed it. However, there came a day when I forgot to do this, and being caught in a rainstorm, before I thought of the danger my joints had rusted, and I was left to stand in the woods until you came to help me. It was a terrible thing to undergo, but during the year I stood there, I had time to think that the greatest loss I had known was the loss of my heart. While I was in love, I was the happiest man on earth, but no one who can love who has not a heart, and so I am resolved to ask Oz to give me one. If he does, I will go back to the Munchkin Maiden and marry her. But Dorothy and the Scarecrow had been greatly interested. Both Dorothy and the Scarecrow had been greatly interested in the story of the Tin Woodman, and now they knew why he was so anxious to get a new heart. All the same, said the Scarecrow, I shall ask for brains instead of a heart, for a fool would not know what to do with a heart if he had one. I shall take the heart, returned the Tin Woodman, for brains do not make one happy, and happiness is the best thing in the world. Dorothy did not say anything, for she was puzzled to know which of her two friends was right, and she decided if she could only get back to Kansas and Aunt Em, it did not matter so much whether the Woodman had no brains and the Scarecrow no heart, for each got what he wanted. What worried her most was that the bread was nearly gone, and another meal for herself and Toto would empty the basket. To be sure, neither the Woodman nor the Scarecrow ever ate anything, but she was not made of tin or straw, and she could not live unless she was fed. Geez, he couldn't have gotten a new axe. You'd think he'd catch on to the fact something was up after the second leg. These children were built different. We've made today's children soft. I mean, you're not wrong. I'm sure if this story was read in some schools, parents would not be happy because of the fact that it's like, so dark. Some kids growing up on R-rated movies that they're true. Yes, they are. However, these are stories meant for children, so it's strange when you think of it like, oh, we can have an adult, watch adult movies, but a book that aimed at children should not be scary. I disagree. Mary Downey Hahn is one of my favorite children's authors. If I could read all the lovely bad ones on stream, I would, but unfortunately I cannot. Oh, next chapter, The Cowardly Lion. Here we go. All this time, Dorothy and her companions had been walking through the thick woods. The road was still paved with yellow brick, but these were much covered by dry branches and dead leaves from the trees, and the walking was not at all good. There were few birds in this part of the forest, for birds love the open country where there is plenty of sunshine, but now and then there came a deep growl from some wild animal hidden among the trees. These sounds made the little girl's heart beat fast, for she did not know what made them, but Toto knew, and he walked close to Dorothy's side and did not even bark in return. Hold on. Okay. Children's. Oh, here comes my boy. Yes. Oh, is it who's everyone? Who's your favorite? Chime in. Scarecrow, Cowardly Lion, or the Tin Woodman? Children's stories now aren't built around life lessons and tough undertones to make them grow up. That's true. That is true. How long will it be, the child asked of the Tin Woodman, before we are out of the forest? I cannot tell, was the answer, for I have never been to the Emerald City. But my father went there once, when I was a boy, and he said it was a long journey through a dangerous country, although nearer to the city where Oz dwells, the country is beautiful. But I am not afraid so long as I have my oil can, and nothing can hurt the Scarecrow, while you bear upon your forehead the mark of the Good Witch's kiss, and that will protect you from harm. But Toto, said the girl anxiously, what will protect him? We must protect him ourselves if he is in danger, replied the Tin Woodman. Just as he spoke, there came from the forest a terrible roar, and the next moment a great lion bounded out into the road. With one blow of his paw, he sent the Scarecrow spinning over and over to the edge of the road, and then he struck the Tin Woodman with his sharp claws. But, to the lion's surprise, he could make no impression on the tin, although the woodman fell over in the road and lay still. Let's see. Scarecrow, Isao. Hi, Isao. Scarecrow for Isao. The only children experience I have is with the movie, and Cowardly Lion was always the one who made me laugh the most. Lion for Eric. I don't know who my favorite is. My favorites are in Return to Oz. I like Gump and the Jack Pumpkinhead. I like them the most. And TikTok and Belina. I love all the characters from... Yeah, TikTok's my favorite, but he's not in this book. I can relate with Lion more because I've always been a nervous wreck, crippled by anxiety, and slowly come around gaining that self-confidence. Yeah, that's true. It's good to have, connections to characters that way. Cowardly Lion is definitely where I've been for quite a bit of my life. Little Toto, now they had an enemy to face, ran barking toward the lion, and the great beast had opened his mouth to bite the dog, when Dorothy, fearing Toto would be killed, and heedless of danger, rushed forward and slapped the lion upon his nose as hard as she could, while she cried out, "Don't you dare to bite Toto! You ought to be ashamed of yourself, a big beast like you, to bite a poor little dog." "I didn't bite him," said the lion, as he rubbed his nose with his paw where Dorothy had hit it. "No, but you tried to," she retorted. "You are nothing but a big coward." "I know it," said the lion, hanging his head in shame. "I've always known it. But how can I help it?" "I don't know, I'm sure. To think of your striking a stuffed man like the poor Scarecrow." "Is he stuffed?" asked the lion in surprise, as he watched her pick up the Scarecrow and set him upon his feet, while she patted him into shape again. "Of course he's stuffed," replied Dorothy, who was still angry. "That's why he went over so easily," remarked the lion. "It astonished me to see him whirl around so. Is the other one stuffed also?" "No," said Dorothy, "he's made of tin." She helped the woodman up again. "That's why he nearly blunted my claws," said the lion. "That when they scratched against the tin it made a cold shiver run down my back. What is that little animal you are so tender of?" "He's my dog, Toto," answered Dorothy. "Is he made of tin or stuffed?" asked the lion. "Neither. He is a meat dog," said the girl. "Oh, he's a curious animal and seems remarkably small, now that I look at him. No one would think of biting such a little thing, except a coward like me," continued the lion sadly. "What makes you a coward?" asked Dorothy, looking at the great beast in wonder, for he was as big as a small horse. "It's a mystery," replied the lion. "Suppose I was born that way. All the other animals in the forest naturally expect me to be brave, for the lion is everywhere thought to be the king of the beasts. I learned that if I roared very loudly, every living thing was frightened and got out of my way. Whenever I've met a man, I've been awfully scared, but I just roared at him, and he has always run away as fast as he could go. If the elephants and the tigers and the bears had ever tried to fight me, I should have run myself. I'm such a coward. But just as soon as they hear me roar, they all try to get away from me, and of course I let them go." "But that isn't right. The king of beasts shouldn't be a coward," said the Scarecrow. "I know it," returned the lion, wiping a tear from his eye with the tip of his tail. "It is my great sorrow and makes my life very unhappy. But whenever there is danger, my heart begins to beat fast." "Perhaps you have heart disease," said the Tin Woodman. "It may be," said the lion. "If you have," continued the Tin Woodman, "you ought to be glad, for it proves you have a heart. For my part, I have no heart, so I cannot have heart disease." "Perhaps," said the lion thoughtfully, "if I had no heart, I should not be a coward." "Have you brains?" asked the Scarecrow. "I suppose. I've never looked to see," replied the lion. "I am going to the Great Oz to ask him to give me some," remarked the Scarecrow, "for my head is stuffed with straw." "And I am going to ask him to give me a heart," said the Woodman. "And I am going to ask him to send Toto and me back to Kansas," added Dorothy. "Do you think Oz could give me courage?" asked the Cowardly Lion. "Just as easily as he could give me brains," said the Scarecrow. "Or give me a heart," said the Tin Woodman. "Or send me back to Kansas," said Dorothy. "Then if you don't mind, I'll go with you," said the lion, "for my life is simply unbearable without a bit of courage." "You'll be very welcome," answered Dorothy, "for you will help to keep away the other wild beasts. It seems to me they must be more cowardly than you are if they will allow you to scare them so easily." "They really are," said the lion, "but that doesn't make me any braver, and as long as I know myself to be a coward, I shall be unhappy." So once more the little company set off upon the journey, the lion walking with stately strides at Dorothy's side. Toto did not approve this new comrade at first, for he could not forget how he nearly had been crushed between the lion's great jaws. But after a time he became more at ease, and presently Toto and the Cowardly Lion had grown to be good friends. During the rest of that day there was no other adventure to mar the peace of their journey. Once, indeed, the Tin Woodman stepped upon a beetle that was crawling along the road and killed the poor little thing. This made the Tin Woodman very unhappy, for he was always careful not to hurt any living creature, and as he walked along he wept several tears of sorrow and regret. These tears ran slowly down his face and over the hinges of his jaw, and there they rusted. When Dorothy presently asked him a question, the Tin Woodman could not open his mouth, for his jaws were tightly rusted together. He became greatly frightened at this and made many motions to Dorothy to relieve him, but she could not understand. The lion was also puzzled to know what was wrong. But the Scarecrow seized the oil can from Dorothy's basket and oiled the woodman's jaws, so that after a few moments he could talk as well as before. "This will serve me a lesson," he said, "to look where I step. For if I should kill another bug or beetle, I should surely cry again, and crying rusts my jaw so that I cannot speak." Thereafter he walked very carefully with his eyes on the road, and when he saw a tiny ant toiling by, he would step over it so as not to harm it. The Tin Woodman knew very well he had no heart, and therefore he took great care never to be cruel or unkind to anything. "You people with hearts," he said, "have something to guide you, and need never do wrong. But I have no heart, and so I must be very careful. When Oz gives me a heart, of course, I needn't mind so much." Breaking news, Elon Musk is now officially in charge of Twitter. Oh, lovely. Surprised I haven't gotten a text alert on my phone. It's really interesting that for somebody who has no heart, he cries very easily at just stepping on a beetle. And the Scarecrow, for having no brains, figured out that the Tin Woodman needed oil for his jaw in order to speak. Interesting. Next chapter, The Journey to the Great Oz. Wait, so he's more careful and empathetic without a heart, but he wants to not mind hurting little things because he has a heart. Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about it. His reasoning is really faulty. He wants a heart so he can love, but at the same time he says if he has a heart, he wouldn't mind about such things. I don't know what he means by that. He's very empathetic. And that, to me, is a sign of having a heart, metaphorically. Heart. So it's really interesting. And the Scarecrow as well. He, if his whole idea was, when Dorothy says, well, obviously we needed to go through the forest to do this. And he goes, well, and that's why I have no brains, because everyone knows that, including me. But when it came to it, and the Tin Woodman couldn't communicate, Dorothy couldn't think of what to do. She didn't understand the problem, and the Scarecrow did. That shows someone right there with smarts and brains. It really is, we have what we wanted with us all along, but with a slightly better setup. Yeah, it really is, because, if you're not paying attention, you're not going to realize it. But obviously here we're all intelligent adults in class. There's intelligent students in my class, so of course you all know this. The Journey to the Great Oz. They were obliged to camp out that night. They need psychological help or something. Sounds like a very false sense of reality. Psychosis? So you can think gooder. I don't know if it's a false sense of reality. I definitely don't think it's psychosis. There's no elements of that. I'm not sure. They were obliged to camp out that night under a large tree in the forest, for there were no houses near. The tree made a good, thick covering to protect them from the dew, and the Tin Woodman chopped a great pile of wood with his axe, and Dorothy built a splendid fire that warmed her and made her feel less lonely. She and Toto ate the last of their bread, and now she did not know what they would do for breakfast. "If you wish," said the lion, "I will go into the forest and kill a deer for you. You can roast it by the fire, since your tastes are so peculiar that you prefer cooked food, and then you will have a very good breakfast." "Don't! Please don't!" begged the Tin Woodman. "I should certainly weep if you killed a poor deer, and then my jaws would rust again." But the lion went away into the forest and found his own supper, and no one ever knew what it was, for he didn't mention it. And the Scarecrow found a tree full of nuts and filled Dorothy's basket with them, so that she would not be hungry for a long time. She thought this was very kind and thoughtful of the Scarecrow, but she laughed heartily at the awkward way in which the poor creature picked up the nuts. His padded hands were so clumsy and the nuts were so small that he dropped almost as many as he put in the basket. But the Scarecrow did not mind how long it took him to fill up the basket, for it enabled him to keep away from the fire, as he feared a spark would get into his straw and burn him up. So he kept a good distance away from the flames, and only came near to cover Dorothy with dry leaves when she lay down to sleep. These kept her very snug and warm, and she slept soundly until morning. When it was daylight, the girl bathed her face in a little rippling brook, and soon after they all started toward the Emerald City. This was to be an eventful day for the travelers. They had hardly been walking an hour when they saw before them a great ditch across the road, and divided the forest as far as they could see on either side. It was a very wide ditch, and when they crept up to the edge and looked into it, they could see it was also very deep, and there were many big, jagged rocks at the bottom. The sides were so steep that none of them could climb down, and for a moment it seemed that their journey must end. "What shall we do?" asked Dorothy despairingly. "I haven't the faintest idea," said the Tin Woodman, and the lion shook his shaggy mane and looked thoughtful. But the Scarecrow said, "We cannot fly, that is certain. Neither can we climb down into this great ditch. Therefore, if we cannot jump over it, we must stop where we are." "I think I could jump over it," said the Cowardly Lion, after measuring the distance carefully in his mind. "Then we are all right," answered the Scarecrow, "for you can carry us all over on your back, one at a time." "Well, I'll try it," said the Lion. "Who will go first?" "I will," declared the Scarecrow, "for if you found that you could not jump over the gulf, Dorothy would be killed or the Tin Woodman badly dented with the rocks below. But if I am on your back, it will not matter so much, for the fall would not hurt me at all." "I am terribly afraid of falling myself," said the Cowardly Lion, "but I suppose there is nothing to do but try it. So get on my back and we will make the attempt." The Scarecrow sat upon the lion's back, and the big beast walked to the edge of the gulf and crouched down. "Why don't you run and jump?" asked the Scarecrow. "Because that isn't the way we lions do these things," he replied. Then, giving a great spring, he shot through the air and landed safely on the other side. They were all greatly pleased to see how easily he did it, and after the Scarecrow got down from his back, the lion sprang across the ditch again. Dorothy thought she should go next, so she took Toto in her arms and climbed on the lion's back, holding tightly to his mane with one hand. The next moment, it seemed as if she were flying through the air, and then, before she had time to think about it, she was safe on the other side. The lion went back a third time and got the Tin Woodman, and then they all sat down for a few moments to give the beast a chance to rest, for his great leaps had made his breath short, and he panted like a big dog that has been running too long. Lion pride. They found the forest very thick on this side, and it looked dark and gloomy. After the lion had rested, they started along the road of yellow brick, silently wondering, each in his own mind, if ever they would come to the end of the woods and reach the bright sunshine again. To add to their discomfort, they soon heard strange noises in the depths of the forest, and the lion whispered to them that it was in this part of the country that the Kalidas lived. "What are the Kalidas?" asked the girl. "They are monstrous beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers," replied the lion, "and with claws so long and sharp that they could tear me in two easily as I could kill Toto. I'm terribly afraid of the Kalidas." "I'm not surprised that you are," returned Dorothy. "They must be dreadful beasts." The lion was about to reply when suddenly they came to another gulf across the road. But this one was so broad and deep that the lion knew at once he could not leap across it. So they sat down to consider what they should do, and after serious thought, the Scarecrow said, "Here is a great tree standing close to the ditch. If the Tin Woodman can chop it down so that it will fall to the other side, we can walk across it easily." "That is a first-rate idea," said the lion. "One would almost suspect you had brains in your head instead of straw." The woodman set to work at once, and so sharp was his axe that the tree was soon chopped nearly through. Then the lion put his strong front legs against the tree and pushed with all his might, and slowly the big tree tipped and fell with a crash across the ditch, with its top branches on the other side. They had just started to cross this queer bridge when a sharp growl made them all look up, and to their horror, They saw running toward them the two great beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers. "They are the Kalidas," said the cowardly lion, beginning to tremble. "Quick!" cried the Scarecrow. "Let us cross over." So Dorothy went first, holding Toto in her arms. The Tin Woodman followed, and the Scarecrow came next. The lion, although he was certainly afraid, turned to face the Kalidas, and then he gave so loud and terrible a roar that Dorothy screamed and the Scarecrow fell over backward, while even the fierce beast stopped short and looked at him in surprise. But, seeing they were bigger than the lion, and remembering that there were two of them and only one of him, the Kalidas again rushed forward, and the lion crossed over the tree and turned to see what they would do next. Without stopping an instant, the fierce beast also began to cross the tree, and the lion said to Dorothy, "We are lost, for they will surely tear us to pieces with their sharp claws. But stand close behind me, and I will fight them as long as I am alive." "Wait a minute," called the Scarecrow. He had been thinking what was best to be done, and now he asked the Woodman to chop away at the end of the tree that rested on their side of the ditch. The Tin Woodman began to use his axe at once, and just as the two Kalidas were nearly across, the tree fell with a crash into the gulf, carrying the ugly, snarling brutes with it, and both were dashed to pieces on the sharp rocks at the bottom. That's not gory for a children's book at all. "Well," said the cowardly lion, drawing a long breath of relief, "I see we are going to live a little while longer, and I am glad of it, for it must be a very uncomfortable thing not to be alive. Those creatures frightened me so badly that my heart is beating yet." "Ah," said the Tin Woodman sadly, "I wish I had a heart to beat." This adventure made the travelers more anxious than ever to get out of the forest, and they walked so fast that Dorothy became tired and had to ride on the lion's back. To their great joy, the trees became thinner the farther they advanced, and in the afternoon they suddenly came upon a broad river flowing swiftly just before them. On the other side of the water they could see the road of yellow brick running through a beautiful country with green meadows dotted with bright flowers, and all the road bordered with trees hanging full of delicious fruits. They were greatly pleased to see this delightful country before them. "How shall we cross the river?" asked Dorothy. "That is easily done," replied the Scarecrow. "The Tin Woodman must build us a raft so we can float to the other side." So the Woodman took his axe and began to chop down small trees to make a raft, and while he was busy at this, the Scarecrow found on the river bank a tree full of fine fruit. This pleased Dorothy, who had eaten nothing but nuts all day, and she made a hearty meal of the ripe fruit. But it takes time to make a raft, even when one is as industrious and untiring as the Tin Woodman, and when night came, the work was not done. They found a cozy place under the trees where they slept well until the morning, and Dorothy dreamed of the Emerald City and of the good wizard Oz, who would soon send her back to her own home again. "Ah, Matsu, welcome in!" "Yes, we are enjoying it. We're now at the Deadly Poppy Field." "Oh, I wish you had been here earlier. We were discussing the film and the advent of Technicolor and how it fits very well that the first half is in gray and the rest is in Technicolor." Oh, that film. Here he goes. We should have Matsu guest lecture. Do you love that film, Matsu? Do you know of the lost footage and the song The Jitterbugs? Do you mean Return to Oz? Are you saying that Return to Oz is terrible? I will fight you, sir. There's a silent adaptation? Is it accessible? Oh, never mind. Nope, not gonna watch it then. I'm not watching that then. The black version of Wizard of Oz? Oh, yes. There's actually a lot of really good ones. The Wiz, with Michael Jackson. The Wiz is fantastic. There's also, so Matsu, we talked about the 1902 play that specifically calls out John D. Rockefeller and the oil industry. There's also, the live TV adaptation, that was on when I think it was CBS was doing all those live musicals and plays, like they did Neverland, Peter Pan, TV version. Was it The Wiz? Did they? Oh yeah, they call The Wiz Live. Phenomenal. Absolutely loved it. And I need to get it. The music was fantastic. They had voguing was in for Emerald City. The Crows had their song. Oh my god, I loved it so much. That was Shanice Williams played Dorothy. Mary J. Blige was the Wicked Witch of the West. Queen Latifah was the Wiz. That is a fantastic version. I absolutely loved it. It was on NBC, not CBS. That one's really good. And then Sci-Fi Channel, back when it was like good. They had Tin Man. Such an underrated movie. It really is. The Wiz was. I mean, it wasn't. It's not that it's underrated. I think just more people today need to watch it. On and on and on and on and on and on. Matsu, when we get to the end of this, we should do a collab stream where we just talk about it panel-wise. Let's plan on that. Tin Man, 2007. It was one season, and it had what's her name? It was 6 hours. I loved it. Oh my god, Zooey Deschanel. Had Alan Cumming. Those are the big names I know. I own it on DVD. I adored it. She goes back and she's DG, Dorothy Gale. She has she's not fit for her farm life. It talks about the sorcerer, and Oz is the outer zone. It's an interpretation. It's an interesting interpretation of it. And I loved it. It's fantastic. So, highly recommend that one too. Maybe we'll watch all of these renditions in my Discord. We'll have to find out. Except for the silent film. Not gonna watch that. No, thank you. Okay. Where am I going? Alright, back to the deadly poppy field. Here we go. Our little party of travelers awakened the next morning refreshed and full of hope, and Dorothy breakfasted like a princess off peaches and plums from the trees beside the river. Behind them was the dark forest they had passed safely through, although they had suffered many discouragements, but before them was a lovely sunny country that seemed to beckon them on to the Emerald City. To be sure, the broad river now cut them off from this beautiful land. But the raft was nearly done, and after the Tin Woodman had cut a few more logs and fastened them together with wooden pins, they were ready to start. Dorothy sat down in the middle of the raft and held Toto in her arms. When the Cowardly Lion stepped upon the raft, it tipped badly, for he was big and heavy. But the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman stood upon the other end to steady it, and they had long poles in their hands to push the raft through the water. They got along quite well at first, but when they reached the middle of the river, the swift current swept the raft downstream, farther and farther away from the road of yellow brick, and the water grew so deep that the long poles would not touch the bottom. "This is bad," said the Tin Woodman, "for if we cannot get to the land, we shall be carried into the country of the Wicked Witch of the West, and she will enchant us and make us her slaves." "And then I should get no brains," said the Scarecrow. "And I should get no courage," said the Cowardly Lion. "And I should get no heart," said the Tin Woodman. "And I should never get back to Kansas," said Dorothy. "We must certainly get to the Emerald City if we can," the Scarecrow continued, and he pushed so hard on his long pole that it stuck fast in the mud at the bottom of the river. Then, before he could pull it out again, or let go, the raft was swept away, and the poor Scarecrow left clinging to the pole in the middle of the river. "Goodbye," he called after them, and they were very sorry to leave him. Indeed, the Tin Woodman began to cry, but fortunately remembered that he might rust, and so dried his tears on Dorothy's apron. Of course, this was a bad thing for the Scarecrow. "I am now worse off than when I first met Dorothy, he thought. Then I was stuck on a pole in a cornfield, where I could make believe scare the crows at any rate. But surely there is no use for a scarecrow stuck on a pole in the middle of a river. I'm afraid I shall never have any brains after all. Down the stream the raft floated, and the poor scarecrow was left far behind. Then the lion said, "Something must be done to save us." Hey, Black Raid, Zoe Deschanel. For a second, I thought she was going to say, "And I shall get no Kansas." Something must be done to save us. I think I can swim to the shore and pull the raft after me if you will only hold fast to the tip of my tail. So he sprang into the water, and the Tin Woodman caught fast hold of his tail. Then the lion began to swim with all his might toward the shore. It was hard work, although he was so big, but by and by they were drawn out of the current, and then Dorothy took the Tin Woodman's long pole and helped push the raft to the land. They were all tired out when they reached the shore at last and stepped off upon the pretty green grass, and they also knew that the stream had carried them a long way past the road of yellow brick that led to the Emerald City. "What shall we do now?" asked the Tin Woodman as the lion lay down in the grass to let the sun dry him. "We must get back to the road in some way," said Dorothy. "The best plan will be to walk along the river bank until we come to the road again," remarked the lion. So when they were rested, Dorothy picked up her basket and they started along the grassy bank to the road from which the river had carried them. It was a lovely country with plenty of flowers and fruit trees and sunshine to cheer them, and they had not felt so sorry for the poor. And had they not felt so sorry for the poor scarecrow, they could have been very happy. They walked along as fast as they could, Dorothy only stopping once to pick a beautiful flower, and after a time the Tin Woodman cried out, "Look!" Then they all looked at the river and saw the scarecrow perched upon his pole in the middle of the water, looking very sad and lonely. "What can we do to save him?" asked Dorothy. The lion and the woodman both shook their heads, for they did not know. So they sat down upon the bank and gazed wistfully at the scarecrow until a stork flew by, who, upon seeing them, stopped to rest at the water's edge. "Who are you and where are you going?" asked the stork. "I am Dorothy," answered the girl, "and these are my friends, the Tin Woodman and the Cowardly Lion, and we are going to the Emerald City." "This isn't the road," said the stork as she twisted her long neck and looked sharply at the queer party. "I know it," returned Dorothy, "but we have lost the scarecrow and are wondering how we shall get him again." "Where is he?" asked the stork. "Over there in the river," answered the little girl. If he wasn't so big and heavy, I would get him for you," remarked the stork. "He isn't heavy a bit," said Dorothy eagerly, "for he's stuffed with straw, and if you will bring him back to us, we shall thank you ever and ever so much." "Well, I'll try," said the stork, "but if I find he is too heavy to carry, I shall have to drop him in the river again." So the big bird flew into the air and over to the water till she came to where the scarecrow was perched upon his pole. Then the stork with her great claws grabbed the scarecrow by the arm and carried him up into the air and back to the bank where Dorothy and the lion and the Tin Woodman and Toto were sitting. When the scarecrow found himself among his friends again, he was so happy that he hugged them all, and even the lion and Toto, and as they walked along he sang "Tol-de-re-dio" at every step. He felt so gay. "I was afraid I should have to stay in the river forever," he said, "but the kind stork saved me, and if I ever get any brains I shall find the stork again and do her some kindness in return." "That's all right," said the stork, who was flying along beside them. "I always like to help anyone in trouble. But I must go now, for my babies are waiting in the nest for me. I hope you will find the Emerald City and that Oz will help you." "Thank you," replied Dorothy, and then the kind stork flew into the air and was soon out of sight. They walked along listening to the singing of the brightly colored birds and looking at the lovely flowers which now became so thick that the ground was carpeted with them. They were big yellow and white and blue and purple blossoms beside a great cluster of scarlet poppies, which were so brilliant in color they almost dazzled Dorothy's eyes. "Aren't they beautiful?" the girl asked as she breathed in the spicy scent of the bright flowers. "I suppose so," answered the scarecrow. "When I have brains I shall probably like them better." "If I only had a heart I should love them," added the Tin Woodman. "I always did like flowers," said the lion. They have seemed so helpless and frail, but there are none in the forest so bright as these." They now came upon more and more of the big scarlet poppies, and fewer of the other flowers, and soon they found themselves in the midst of a great meadow of poppies. Now it was well known that when there are many of these flowers, they together, their odor is so powerful that anyone who breathes it falls asleep. And if the sleeper is not carried away from the scent of the flowers, he sleeps on and on forever. But Dorothy did not know this, nor could she get away from the bright red flowers that were everywhere about. So presently her eyes grew heavy, and she felt she must sit down to rest and to sleep. Does anyone know the references to red poppies? To the poppies? I know at least one of you does. Opium! Yes, opium! I mean, I guess you would have the plague too with the smell, but poppy seeds, it's not illegal. It's illegal to grow and buy one specific type of poppy because of the opium that it can make. The Papaver somniferum poppy is illegal to grow or buy. The entire plant cannot, because it's opium. And if you look at the word, so somni is the Latin word. It's the Latin root for sleep and slumber. Hence why it's in here. So yes. Also, the visual in this case, a sea of scarlet flowers is a grim visual, asleep in a sea of red. Yeah. Yeah. Another very grim visual. So we have opium. And opium... trying to think. Opium is it's a depressant. So it slows your body down. So hence why they're falling asleep in the poppy field too. It's really fascinating. When was the Opium Wars? Okay, so he was alive during was he born? The thing. Hold on. Oh, I lost the thing. He was alive during the Opium Wars. Not during the first Opium War, but he would know about it. The second Opium War, I believe he was. Yeah, because it ended in the 60s. So it would be something that was well known to him. Those who are more familiar with the movie are going to be really surprised by this book. Yeah, I got earlier. So again, another check-in. What's everyone's thoughts about the book so far? Matsu, people were very surprised by the fact that the Tin Woodman cut off his legs, and then his arms, and then his head, and then his body, just waiting for the glorious flying monkeys. It's very different. All right. Let's see. Okay. They now came upon more and more... Oh boy, once you get to the Tin Woodman of Oz, it gets weird with him. Oh yeah. Surprised the darker backstories, but the same it doesn't treat me like a child in that way. Yeah. It's enjoyable for everyone. She feels... Okay, but the Tin Woodman would not let her do this. We must hurry and get back to the road of yellow brick before dark, he said, and the Scarecrow agreed with him. So they kept walking until Dorothy could stand no longer. Her eyes closed in spite of herself, and she forgot where she was and fell among the poppies fast asleep. What shall we do? Asked the Tin Woodman. If we leave her here, she will die, said the Lion. The smell of the flowers is killing us all. I myself can scarcely keep my eyes open, and the dog is asleep already. It was true. Toto had fallen down beside his little mistress, but the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman, not being made of flesh, were not troubled by the scent of the flowers. "Run fast," said the Scarecrow to the lion, "and get out of this deadly flower bed as soon as you can. We will bring the little girl with us, but if you should fall asleep, you are too big to be carried." So the lion aroused himself and bounded forward as fast as he could go. In a moment he was out of sight. "Let us make up a chair with our hands and carry her," said the Scarecrow. So they picked up Toto and put the dog in Dorothy's lap, and then they made a chair with their hands for the seat and their arms for the arms, and carried the sleeping girl between them through the flowers. On and on they walked, and it seemed that the great carpet of deadly flowers that surrounded them would never end. They followed the bend of the river and came at last upon their friend, the lion, lying fast asleep among the poppies. The flowers had been too strong for the huge beast, and he had given up at last, and fallen only a short distance from the end of the poppy bed, where the sweet grass spread in beautiful green fields before them. "We can do nothing for him," said the Tin Woodman sadly, "for he is much too heavy to lift. We must leave him here to sleep on forever, and perhaps he will dream that he has found courage at last." "I'm sorry," said the Scarecrow. "The lion was a very good comrade for one so cowardly, but let us go on." They carried the sleeping girl to a pretty spot beside the river, far enough from the poppy field to prevent her breathing any more of the poison of the flowers, and here they laid her gently on the soft grass and waited for the fresh breeze to waken her. The next chapter, The Queen of the Field Mice. "We cannot be far from the road of yellow brick now," remarked the Scarecrow as he stood beside the girl, "for we have come nearly as far as the river carried us away." The Tin Woodman was about to reply when he heard a low growl, and turning his head, which worked beautifully on hinges, he saw a strange beast come bounding over the grass toward them. It was, indeed, a great yellow wildcat, and the Woodman thought it must be chasing something, for its ears were lying close to its head, and its mouth was wide open, showing 2 rows of ugly teeth, while its red eyes glowed like balls of fire. As it came nearer, the Tin Woodman saw that running before the beast was a little gray field mouse, and although he had no heart, he knew it was wrong for the wildcat to try to kill such a pretty, harmless creature. I appreciate they engineer their own way out versus Deus Ex Good Witch. Yeah! I just realized my vape flavor fits so well as its milk of the poppy. Oh my god. You were prepared for class today, Raven. So the Woodman raised his axe, and as the wildcat ran by, he gave it a quick blow that cut the beast's head clean off from its body, and it rolled over at his feet in 2 pieces. Jesus. The field mouse, now that it was freed from its enemy, stopped short, and coming slowly up to the Woodman, it said in a squeaky little voice, "Oh, thank you ever so much for saving my life." "Don't speak of it, I beg of you," replied the Woodman. "I have no heart, you know, so I'm careful to help those who may need a friend, even if it happens to only be a mouse." "Only a mouse!" cried the little animal indignantly. "Why, I am a queen, the queen of all the field mice." "Oh, indeed," said the Woodman, making a bow. "Therefore you have done a great deed, as well as a brave one, in saving my life," added the queen. Oh, he got executed. Oh, yeah. At that moment, several mice were seen running up as fast as their little legs could carry them, and when they saw their queen, they exclaimed, "Oh, your majesty, we thought you would be killed. How did you manage to escape the great wildcat?" They all bowed so low that to the little queen that they almost stood upon their heads. "This funny Tin Man," she answered, "killed the wildcat and saved my life, so hereafter you must all serve him and obey his slightest wish." "We will," cried all the mice in a shrill chorus, and then they scampered in all directions, for Toto had awakened from his sleep, and seeing all these mice around him, gave one bark of delight and jumped right into the middle of the group. Toto had always loved to chase mice when he lived in Kansas, and he saw no harm in it. "You have yet to see the killings, Matsu." But the Tin Woodman caught the dog in his arms and held him tight while he called to the mice, come back, Toto shall not hurt you." At this, the Queen of the Mice stuck her head out from underneath the clump of grass and asked in a timid voice, "Are you sure he will not bite us?" "I will not let him," said the Woodman, "so do not be afraid." One by one the mice came creeping back, and Toto did not bark again, although he tried to get out of the Woodman's arms, and would have bitten him had he not known very well he was made of tin. Finally, one of the biggest mice spoke. "Is there anything we can do," it asked, "to repay you for saving the life of our queen?" Joseph's name, Lord of the Field Mice, Slayer of the Great Demon Beast. It's a revelation in a later book which makes that killing oh so much more twisted. Oh, I think I know which revelation you're talking about. Matsu. Well, the wildcat was apparently a beast. Matsu, I think I know which one you're talking about, which is also something that, if it's the one I'm thinking of, its Baum was questioned about a certain thing related to this, and he kind of, like, made shit up along as he went. Makes the killing more creepy. Yeah. I think I know which one it is you're talking about. Is it related to a certain little dog and his actions or lack thereof? You got me. Well, if everyone wants me to continue reading the series, I'd be happy to do so. I just sent you a DM on Discord, Matsu, because I'm curious if that's the one, that's what you're thinking about. Oh, it has to do something that occurs in everyone in Oz? Oh, I'm considering reading some Lovecraft. I'm considering reading it. As well. Oh, yes, Matsu, that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's right, because it happens with the Tin Woodman. Yeah, now I know what you're talking about. Now, let's see. Nothing that I know of, answered the Woodman, but the Scarecrow, who had been trying to think, but could not because his head was stuffed with straw, said quickly, "Oh yes, you can save our friend, the Cowardly Lion, who's asleep in the poppy bed." "A lion!" cried the little queen. "Why, he would eat us all up." "Oh no," declared the Scarecrow, "this lion is a coward." "Really?" asked the mouse. "He says so himself," answered the Scarecrow, "and he would never hurt anyone who is our friend. If you will help us to save him, I promise that he shall treat you all with kindness." "Very well," said the queen. "We trust you, but what shall we do?" "Are there many of these mice which call you queen and are willing to obey you?" "Oh yes, there are thousands," she replied. "Then send for them all to come here as soon as possible, and let each one bring a long piece of string." The queen turned to the mice that attended her and told them to go at once to get all her people. As soon as they heard her orders, they ran away in every direction as fast as possible. "Now," said the Scarecrow to the Tin Woodman, "you must go to those trees by the riverside and make a truck that will carry the lion." So the Woodman went at once to the trees and began to work, and he soon made a truck out of the Oops, I just lost my page. And he soon made a truck out of the limbs of trees, from which he chopped away all the leaves and branches. He fastened it together with wooden pegs, and made the four wheels out of short pieces of a big tree trunk. So fast and so well did he work, that by the time the mice began to arrive, the truck was all ready for them. They came from all directions, and there were thousands of them, big mice and little mice and middle-sized mice, and each one brought a piece of string in his mouth. It was about this time that Dorothy woke from her long sleep and opened her eyes. She was greatly astonished to find herself lying upon the grass, with thousands of mice standing around and looking at her timidly. But the Scarecrow told her about everything, and turning to the dignified little mouse, he said, "Permit me to introduce to you Her Majesty the Queen." Dorothy nodded gravely, and the Queen made a curtsy, after which she became quite friendly with the little girl. Channels too. Oh, Annabeth, you should. Looking into H.R. Geiger art lately, and it's so cool. Oh, Geiger's really cool. So Scorn, but really his work is amazing. I want to play that so bad, but alas, I'm on PlayStation. Scorn. I think I was looking at that one. And I freaked out when I saw it. I'm pretty sure it's on Xbox Game Pass right now. I think. Because I debated it and went, nope, never mind. Oh, yeah. The Scarecrow and the Woodman now began to fasten the mice to the truck, using the strings they had brought. One end of the string was tied around the neck of each mouse, and the other end to the truck. Of course, the truck was 1,000 times bigger than any of the mice who were to draw it, but when all the mice had been harnessed, they were able to pull it quite easily. Even the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman could sit on it, and were drawn swiftly by their queer little horses to the place where the lions lay asleep. After a great deal of hard work, for the lion was heavy, they managed to get him up on the truck. The queen hurriedly gave her people the order to start, for she feared if the mice stayed among the poppies too long, they also would fall asleep. At first, the little creatures, many though there were, could hardly stir the heavy loaded truck, but the Woodman and the Scarecrow both pushed from behind, and they got along better. Soon they rolled the lion out of the poppy bed to the green fields, where he could breathe the sweet, fresh air again, instead of the poisonous scent of the flowers. Dorothy came to meet them and thanked the little mice warmly for saving her companion from death. She had grown so fond of the big lion she was glad he had been rescued. Then the mice were unharnessed from the truck and scampered away through the grass to their homes. The Queen of the Mice was the last to leave. If ever you need us again," she said, "come out into the field and call, and we shall hear you and come to your assistance. Goodbye." "Goodbye," they all answered, and away the Queen ran, while Dorothy held Toto tightly lest he should run after her and frighten her. After this they sat down beside the lion until he should awaken, and the Scarecrow brought Dorothy some fruit from a tree nearby, which she ate for her dinner. And we will end there. The next chapter is The Guardian of the Gates. We are literally almost halfway through this book. Yeah. We're on page 32, and there's 80 pages, and the first half hour of stream was me doing, like, lessons, so we will finish this book next Thursday. Game Pass is great. Scorn looks dope, and keeping up with the developments for almost 2 years. This is a dope read. Thank you for this. I'm happy to read a good book. And yes, please, I should have to be up in 6 hours. Eric, go to sleep. You can always watch the VOD. Yes, we're gonna stop there. Next Thursday at 8 o'clock, we will continue reading, and we will finish The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And I'll make some time. Probably I'll start doing some things on Sundays in my server, watching films and stuff. So close to 11,000 points, though. Oh, are you aiming for Teacher's Pet? I think, yeah, you're aiming for Teacher's Pet. You know, you would probably have it if you didn't do all those ara-aras and stuff before. No, VODs don't have the same vibe as live. That's true. That is true. I do prefer to catch things live. Alright. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming to the first stream of The Wizard of Oz. Next time I will hopefully have an actual thumbnail for this. I've been totally busy with my mom. We hung out and went to a bunch of haunted locations, real haunted locations, not like creepy haunted houses they manufacture, but actual haunted places. Which was super, super cool. Let's see if there's anyone on that I can raid. It was a lot of fun. I didn't get creepy vibes from the one that's like really haunted. Actually, 2 of the places we went to are featured on Ghost Adventures, which is pretty cool. And we even got to go inside one of them, even though it's technically closed to the public. The lady was going in and invited us inside the first floor. And that was super cool. I got a picture of it. Why can you never go to haunted locations because of that? Yeah. It was super cool, and I definitely want to go back again. But the place is being renovated right now, so it is closed to the public and has been for years because it's kind of dangerous inside. But they let us in, just, inside the front door to take a quick peek, and I got a picture, which is super cool. I did kind of get a creepy picture from one angle of the house. I can't quite figure out what's in it, but it's pretty neat. What's haunted out there anyways? There's more haunted stuff out here. There's a lot of haunted stuff. Renovations serve more activity too. Yeah. It's beautiful home. Has not been inhabited since the 50s though, so it's fallen in a lot of disrepair on the inside. But the outside actually has really good bones, really good structure. It's incredible. I want to look more into it. She didn't have time to talk more because I was very curious about the renovations on the outside, and whether or not the brickwork had been repaired because it looked incredible. The foundation had been cracked a little, but it doesn't look like it's unstable. And people can go into the basement to do like ghost tours and stuff because that's been, repaired and finished. Hey, Ike! Oh, I have my thing open over here. That's why there's probably an echo. Okay, close that. Yeah, so it's really cool, and if you're in my Discord, maybe I'll post some pictures because it's not that close to where I live. Alright, let's see. Jiro is playing Pico Park. Iseo is playing Vampire Survivors. Iseo has been chilling with us, so let's go raid her. Because I don't think anyone else is playing anything or doing some readings. Yeah, let's go give Iseo a raid. Playing Vampire Survivors. Let's fight the Angels again. Okay, that sounds cool. Alright, so let's head on over there and give her a raid. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed, The Wizard of Oz. It seems like everyone did. And again, next Thursday we will complete it. On Sunday, I will be, Yes, thank you. So hypersonic, yes, Sunday is cat time, Sunday is Stray, and then in the evening in my Discord, I will be streaming, not streaming on my channel, but in my Discord, you can help me design my ugly Christmas sweater outfit. So let's start the raid. Thank you everyone for coming today. I will see you on Sunday. Have a good night, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.